A crystal glass, filled with sparkling champagne, shattered into tiny shards as it struck the cold marble floor. That sound was the culmination of the moment the words of the man in the sharp black suit reached my ears. Just 20 minutes earlier, I had been the object of ridicule and contempt from my own family, who branded me the family loser. Now, in my hands were documents with the power to destroy everything they had worked so hard to build. My name is Garrett Whitmore, and an hour ago, I was the embodiment of family disappointment. I am a humble teacher, a man who voluntarily gave up the brilliant prospects awaiting an heir, choosing dusty classrooms and grading papers over engaging with teenagers full of youthful idealism. At 28, I earned a modest $52,000 a year, while my brother Preston reveled in seven-figure incomes. My mother, Vivian Whitmore, never missed an opportunity to remind me of this. She had a particular way of introducing me at social events, turning my profession into a kind of incurable disease. "This is Garrett, our youngest. He teaches," she would say with a tragic sigh. Then came a pregnant pause, allowing the full weight of this sentence to settle on her listeners before she added, with a hint of hopelessness, "at a public school." My father, Douglas Whitmore, built the family company, as he loved to recount, from nothing, relying solely on his unyielding will and a modest $5,000 loan. Whitmore Industries grew into a colossal corporation, controlling $60 million in assets, with contracts spanning the globe from Boston to Bangkok. Preston, my older brother, just 3 years my senior, was proclaimed the heir to this vast empire. The golden boy was finally ascending to his rightful throne. But standing on the driveway, clutching papers and fingers numb from the November cold, I realized that everything I believed about my family was built on a foundation of lies, grander than any of their fabled success stories. The man in the black suit, who introduced himself as Harrison Cross, had just handed me irrefutable evidence that turned everything upside down. The loser, the disappointment, the teacher who couldn't succeed in business. It turned out I had been the rightful owner of Whitmore Industries for 3 whole months, without even knowing it. The sound of the champagne glass breaking still echoes in my memory, for it marked the moment the Whitmore family empire began its inevitable fall, and I held the hammer, ready to deliver the crushing blow. Thanksgiving in the Whitmore family was never just about the traditional turkey and expressing gratitude for the past year. It was an annual review of achievements, carefully disguised as a festive dinner, where your worth was measured solely by the size of your profits, and your place at the table directly depended on your tax bracket. I pulled up to my parents' luxurious estate promptly at 4:00 p.m., knowing that being even 5 minutes late would trigger an angry tirade about punctuality being the cornerstone of success. The house, sprawling across 3 acres of impeccably manicured Connecticut landscape, was a majestic structure of brick and glass, an embodiment of architectural ego. Every window radiated a warm, inviting light. But once you stepped inside, that warmth was replaced by an icy detachment. My old Honda Civic sputtered twice before finally dying in the driveway, surrounded by gleaming luxury cars whose value exceeded most people's mortgages. Preston's pristine white Tesla Model S, of course, held the most prominent spot, polished to a mirror shine, as if mocking my dusty windshield. My mother's black Mercedes, my father's vintage Bentley, and a collection of BMWs and Audis belonging to various relatives filled the circular driveway, transforming it into an automotive display of power and wealth. "Garrett's here." My cousin Bethany's voice drifted from the foyer as I entered. She said it as if announcing an annoying inconvenience, like a sudden rain shower at a picnic. "The teacher has arrived." Bethany worked for a major pharmaceutical company, doing something in marketing that she claimed saved lives, but was really about grossly inflating drug prices. She had a practiced smile that never reached her eyes, and a husband named Theodore who laughed too loudly at his own tax bracket jokes. The house was thick with the aroma of roasted turkey and expensive perfume, mingled with the scent of leather and bourbon that seemed to have permanently seeped into the walls. Family photographs lining the hallway presented a chronological record of the Whitmore family's achievements. Preston's graduation from Harvard, his first day as vice president, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new office in Singapore. My photos grew smaller and more inconspicuous each year until, in the most recent family portrait, I was partially obscured behind a decorative vase. Preston stood by the marble fireplace in the grand living room, holding court with our uncles, discussing quarterly forecasts and market expansion prospects. He wore an elegant charcoal suit that likely cost 3 months of my teaching salary. His wedding ring sparkled in the lamplight as he gestured, recounting a story about crushing a competitor. "The key to success is leverage," he lectured Uncle Vernon, who nodded in agreement despite running a struggling chain of mattress stores. "You find their weakness, apply pressure, and wait for them to break." My father sat in his favorite high-backed leather armchair, which no one else was allowed to occupy, a glass of bourbon in hand and a neatly folded Wall Street Journal beside him. He granted me a nod that lasted precisely 1 second before re-immersing himself in Preston's monologue. Douglas Whitmore had perfected the art of making you feel invisible, even when he was looking directly at you. My sister Chloe waved to me from across the room, the only genuine greeting I received that evening. She was a cardiothoracic surgeon at the prestigious Mount C Clinic, saving actual lives, while Preston merely shuffled numbers and spreadsheets. Despite Chloe's achievements, they seemed overshadowed by Preston's triumph. In Mother's eyes, medicine was noble, but business was true power and influence. Vivian Whitmore, like an iron-willed conductor, directed this family spectacle. She glided through the living room in her elegant cream dress, adjusting flawless floral arrangements and straightening perfectly hung paintings, all to ensure that every family member understood their place in the strict hierarchy. "Garrett," she said, barely glancing in my direction, "your usual spot is by the kitchen door. We need clear access for the help." It was the help, not assistants or catering staff, as if referring to inanimate objects rather than living people. "Good to see you, Mom," I replied. But she had already shifted her attention to Cousin Roland, criticizing his choice of tie despite the fact that he managed a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. I moved through the room, past Aunt Patricia, engrossed in recounting her new appointment to a charity board, and Uncle Jerome, pontificating on the intricacies of yacht maintenance. Every conversation devolved into an unspoken competition, every remark a veiled display of wealth and influence. "How's your teaching going?" Uncle Vernon inquired, with the same expression one might use to ask about a chronic illness. "Actually, it's going great. One of my students just got a full scholarship to Columbia." "Columbia," he echoed, then took a long sip of whiskey. "Well, at least someone in your orbit is achieving something." The dining room gleamed with Waterford crystal and ancestral silver, which, according to legend, had been brought to America on the Mayflower, though I suspected Mom had acquired it at an antique sale in the 90s. Abundance was a Whitmore hallmark, even where unnecessary 20-place settings for 18 people. This was my family. This was my Thanksgiving. And in just half an hour, everything was about to go wrong. The formal dinner began with my father's traditional toast, but this time, something subtly different hung in the air. He rose slowly and ceremoniously, tapping his crystal glass with a silver spoon until absolute silence filled the room. The chandelier light fell across his face at an angle that made him appear older and more weary than I was accustomed to seeing. "Family," he began, his voice full of authority and confidence, "for 30 years, I have transformed Whitmore Industries from a small Newark warehouse into an international logistics empire. Today, I announce the beginning of a new chapter." Preston straightened in his chair, trying to feign surprise, though I clearly saw he was in on it. Mom placed a hand to her chest in feigned anticipation. "As of Monday, I am stepping down as CEO," Father continued, fixing his gaze on Preston. "My son Preston will lead Whitmore Industries. The board of directors unanimously voted for this decision yesterday." The room erupted in applause. Preston rose, his practiced smile spreading across his face like oil on water. "Thank you, Dad. I promise to honor everything you've built and to grow it. We project 40% growth over the next 2 years. To Preston!" Uncle Jerome exclaimed, raising his glass. "To the next generation of Whitmore excellence." Everyone but me took a sip. The champagne tasted bitter. Mom stood from her chair, triumphantly raising her glass. To Preston, who unlike some understands what it means to be a Whitmore, who realizes that family is about building something together, not running off to play savior in some backwater. Her last words were accompanied by a direct, condemning glare at me. Everyone present turned to follow her gaze. Uncle Vernon, having had too much to drink and losing his remaining tact, decided to fan the flames. "Hold on, Vivian. Weren't both sons supposed to get a chance in the company? Garrett's smart enough. He graduated college with honors." "A state college," Mom snapped, correcting him. "With a history degree. What contribution could he possibly make to a logistics empire? Knowledge of the Napoleonic Wars?" A stifled laugh rippled through the room. "I chose a different path," I replied, trying to make my voice sound more confident than I felt. "There's nothing wrong with teaching." "Different," Mom sneered, but it was the kind of laugh she used to diminish people. "That's just one name for it." Garrett made his choice 5 years ago. He wanted to be noble, to make a difference. "Tell us, son, how big a difference does $47,000 a year make?" $52,000, I corrected. "Ah, yes, forgive me. $52,000. Preston's last bonus was more than you'll earn in 10 years. Preston leaned back in his chair, casually swirling his wine glass. "Come on, Mom, let's not make it a competition. Everyone makes their own choices." "Yes, we do," Mom retorted, her voice growing louder and sharper. "Some choose greatness, others choose mediocrity. Garrett had every opportunity. The best schools, the best connections, a guaranteed place in the company. And he threw it all away to teach teenagers who fall asleep in his lectures." "Not all of them fall asleep," I quietly countered. "One of his students got into Columbia," Chloe tried to interject. Mom waved her hand dismissively. "One student. Preston just closed a contract that will employ 300 people. That's impact. That's a legacy." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping deafeningly across the hardwood floor, like a blade piercing the silence. My mother's fury was razor-sharp, poised to deliver a painful blow. "You know what? I have something to say," Garrett tried to declare, but was rudely cut off by his mother's imperious command. "Sit down," she ordered, her voice laced with a tone that could cut not only air, but glass. "You're just a loser, Garrett. You're a disappointment who scornfully threw away every opportunity we provided for the pitiful role of a hero in some run-down public school. Don't you dare think you have anything anyone at this table wants to hear." Her words, like poisonous fumes, tainted the atmosphere in the room. Even Preston, usually self-satisfied, felt uncomfortable, suddenly engrossed in examining the contents of his glass. "You're a disgrace to our family," she continued, not letting up and rising to her full height, her anger escalating with each passing second. "Do you know what I tell people when they ask about you? I tell them you're finding yourself. Because admitting that my son is just a public school teacher scraping by on a meager salary is unbearably humiliating for me." "Vivian." Father timidly attempted to stop her, but she was relentless. "No, Douglas, he needs to hear the truth. Every year we gather here and pretend that Garrett isn't the black sheep of our family, but I'm tired of pretending. You could have reached the top, taken your place alongside Preston, but instead, you're a nobody, just as I always suspected." A heavy silence hung in the air like a thick fog. Aunt Patricia suddenly became engrossed in her napkin, Uncle Vernon reached for another drink, and Chloe seemed to want to say something but couldn't find the right words. "You're right," Garrett's muffled voice sounded. "I'm exactly who you think I am." With those words, he left the room, leaving his family to celebrate their imagined success, unaware that in just 10 minutes, their world, built on power, wealth, and family ties, would collapse like a house of cards. Stepping out through the grand hall, he cast a fleeting glance at the family photographs, chronicling his gradual disappearance from the Whitmore family history. The November air crashed down on him like an icy shower, clearing his thoughts. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from 28 years of futile attempts to earn recognition from people who had long since passed judgment on him. And for what? To be publicly humiliated on a day that was supposed to be dedicated to family unity? The crunch of gravel underfoot as he walked toward his car sounded like a quiet rebellion. His old Honda Civic, a loyal companion spotted with rust, stood alone between Preston's luxurious Tesla and his mother's elegant Mercedes, like a humble dandelion in a manicured rose garden. The metaphor was not lost on him. Fumbling in his pockets for his keys, he dropped them before finally retrieving them. Sounds of celebration drifted from the house, muffled laughter penetrating through the closed windows. They had likely already moved on to praising Preston's accomplishments, oblivious to his absence. Garrett Whitmore. He spun around sharply and saw a man standing a few feet away. His appearance was unexpected and silent, despite the gravel driveway. The stranger was around 55, his silver hair reflecting the light from the house. He wore a sharp black suit that gave him the appearance of someone from another world. Everything about his demeanor spoke of perfection, from his gleaming polished shoes to his leather briefcase, which likely cost more than Garrett's monthly earnings. "Who's asking?" he snapped, tired of the humiliation and in no mood for further inquiries. "My name is Harrison Cross. I'm N. Aherney from Cross and Associates." He glanced at the house, then back at Garrett, his face difficult to read. "I've been trying to reach you for 3 months, but your family has been quite effective at intercepting my messages. Look, if this is about some lawsuit or debt collection, now is not a good time." "No," Cross replied and took a step forward, and now Garrett could see his face more clearly. A hint of sympathy, or perhaps understanding, flickered in the lawyer's eyes. "Your grandfather, William Whitmore, left specific instructions for this to be delivered to you, and only you, on your 28th birthday. That was 3 months ago." "My grandfather?" "Grandpa Will, whom I remember for peppermint candies and stories of building model trains in his workshop. That's impossible. Grandpa Will died 18 years ago. 12 years had passed since his death. Yes, he's no longer with us, and he foresaw what your family would become," Harrison said, his voice imbued with seriousness and urgency. "Mr. Whitmore, I need you to understand the gravity of this moment. I've been practicing law for 3 decades, drafted hundreds of wills, but I've never encountered anything quite like this." He extended a briefcase to me, and the gesture felt like a turning point, as if I stood at a crossroads where one road led back to my car, my modest apartment, and my familiar life, and the other into the unknown. "What's in it?" I asked. "The truth," Harrison replied succinctly. "The truth your family has carefully hidden from you. Your father knows about my attempts to contact you. He mobilized his lawyers, demanding I cease my actions, threatening to drown my firm in litigation. But your grandfather was adamant about the conditions of the inheritance, and today those conditions have been met." "What conditions?" "You had to be 28, you had to have worked outside the family business for at least 5 years, and," he paused, glancing at the house, "you had to be completely rejected by your family. Your grandfather called it the moment of clarity." Thoughts swirled in my head. How could he have predicted tonight? A sad, knowing smile appeared on Harrison's face. He knew his son, knew what Douglas would become and what Vivian would allow. He saw it even before you were born. Your grandfather was a perceptive man. He was not naive. I stared at the briefcase, its black leather reflecting the porch light. "What if I refuse to take it?" "Then you'll return to your old life, and everything will remain unchanged. Your family will continue to treat you as they always have, the truth will remain buried, and your grandfather's last will unfulfilled." His last wish was to provide you with what he called the ultimate lesson. Harrison extended the briefcase again. "You'll understand what that means." I remembered Grandpa Will, the hours spent in his workshop while Preston attended business camp and Chloe medical seminars. He taught me to build things with my hands, to value work that produced real results. "They hid the truth from you for too long," Harrison said, his voice piercing my memories. I took the briefcase, and standing right there on the driveway, opened it, illuminating its contents with my phone's flashlight. The first document was a handwritten letter on cream-colored paper, the very kind Grandpa Will always used for important messages. My hands trembled as I recognized his clear handwriting. "Dear Garrett, if you are reading this, you have turned 28, and your family has shown you their true colors. By now, they have probably convinced you that you are a loser, a disappointment, a man who traded greatness for mediocrity. Well, let them think that. The truth is far more interesting. The company your father supposedly built from nothing, I funded every single cent of it. That $5,000 loan he keeps harping about was actually $5 million, and it came with conditions he hid for 25 years. Whitmore Industries never belonged to him. He was supposed to be a manager, nothing more." I looked up at Harrison, and he nodded, urging me to continue reading. "I retained 51% ownership through a shell company in Delaware called WQW Holdings. Your father knows about this. He's been forging my signature on documents for years, hoping no one would ever check. But I've been gone for 18 years, so I suppose I can't complain about identity theft. Ownership was always meant to skip a generation and come to you. Not Preston, not Chloe, but you. Because even when you were 8, you were the only one who visited me in the hospital, because you wanted to hear my stories, not because you wanted to be in my will. The reading of the will brought Garrett a stunning revelation. The lawyer, Harrison, handed him a document sealed with official stamps, confirming his ownership of WQW Holdings, which controlled 51% of Whitmore Industries. According to his grandfather's will, upon turning 28 3 months prior, Garrett became the majority owner of the company. This meant that all decisions made by his father and brother recently were legally void without his consent. Stunned, Garrett couldn't believe what was happening. Harrison explained that his grandfather, foreseeing the situation, had created a structure whereby Garrett could only inherit the company by proving his independence and success outside the family business for at least 5 years. 6 years of teaching had confirmed this. In the letter, Grandpa Will warned his grandson about potential denials from his father, claiming the documents were forged. To eliminate doubt, he had attached recordings of conversations confirming the ownership structure, and Harrison kept copies in a bank vault along with 30 years of documentation. The late grandfather expressed regret that Garrett's father had become greedy and cruel, willing to do anything to achieve his goals, a path enabled by his mother. Garrett, in contrast, had chosen a path of building and helping others. The company, valued at $60 million, was now in his hands, and his grandfather instructed him to use wealth as a tool for construction, not destruction. Without wasting time, Garrett called Preston, who answered with an irritated voice. He demanded an immediate meeting with the entire family, especially his father. A couple of minutes later, they emerged, his mother with a glass of wine, his father looking displeased, and Preston engrossed in his phone. His mother reproachfully stated that it would do Garrett good to hear the criticism that had been leveled against them. At that moment, Harrison introduced himself as the executor of William Whitmore's will. His father's face went white, fear reflected in his eyes. He claimed his father's estate had been settled 18 years ago. Harrison calmly countered that they were discussing the private trust of WQW Holdings. The glass in his mother's hand slipped, shattering on the driveway. Preston laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. Garrett presented proof of his 51% ownership in Whitmore Industries, declaring all decisions made without his approval over the past 3 months invalid. His father, his voice trembling, accused him of lying. Harrison suggested he contact his lawyer and inquire about WQW Holdings and the reasons for the threats he had received over the past 3 months. His father stopped Preston, who was about to call his lawyer, and admitted the truth. The confession hung in the air. His mother was speechless. 6 months later, Garrett stood in the same dining room where he had been humiliated. Now, however, everything had changed. The ancestral paintings had disappeared from the walls, replaced by photographs of employees at corporate events and charity functions. The massive mahogany table had been replaced by a simpler, more elegant one, conducive to conversation. Preston, after receiving a generous severance package, went to Thailand to find himself. He sent Garrett an email with 2 words, "I'm sorry." Garrett had not yet replied. His parents moved to Florida, retaining millions in personal assets, but losing control of the company. His father tried to dispute the transfer of ownership, but abandoned the endeavor upon learning of the prospect of jail time for fraud. His mother had not spoken to Garrett since that memorable night, ignoring him at a charity event, despite the fact that his donations supported the organization's work. Chloe was the only family member who maintained contact with the protagonist. The morning after Thanksgiving, she called, tearfully apologizing for years of lacking support. Over coffee, she confessed, "They'll never forgive you." To which the protagonist replied, "They never forgave me for being myself. At least now I'm free from trying to earn their approval." The company's transformations were astounding. The protagonist retained jobs for all 800 employees, ensuring them the respect they had been denied under his father. The minimum wage was raised to $70,000 a year, a profit-sharing system was introduced, and a scholarship program for employees' children was launched. Denise from accounting, who had been unfairly passed over for promotions, became the chief operating officer. She shared that for the first time in 15 years, she saw people enthusiastically coming to work. "Your grandfather would be proud," she remarked at the Monday morning meeting, recalling how he used to bring donuts to the warehouse workers every evening, a tradition his father had stopped immediately after the funeral. The protagonist resumed that tradition. Profits decreased by 8%, but productivity increased by 20%. It turned out that when people feel valued, they work harder. Who would have thought? Preston's grandiose Singapore project was canceled, and the freed-up funds were redirected to improve employee health insurance, providing full family coverage. The protagonist continued to teach history of physical education at the high school on Tuesdays. Upon learning of his inheritance, the principal offered to name the building after him, but he declined. The children didn't need to know their teacher was a $60 million owner. They needed someone who cared about their future. Harrison Cross became more than just a lawyer to the protagonist, replacing the grandfather he had lost 18 years ago. Over monthly dinners, he shared stories about Grandpa Will that the protagonist's family had kept hidden. "He foresaw everything," Harrison said over dinner, "even how your mother would drop her wine glass, realizing her power was an illusion. He understood them better than they understood themselves." Grandpa Will's letter now holds a place of honor on the wall of the protagonist's office, next to a photograph of them building model trains together. But there's a part of the letter he never revealed, the part that explained everything. "Garrett, your family will call you a loser for choosing to teach. Pay them no mind. Every student you inspire, every life you change, every mind you open, that is a success they will never comprehend. Money can be rebuilt, companies come and go, but a great teacher builds the future. That's why the company belongs to you, not just because you will manage it better than Preston, though you will, but because you understand success without purpose is an expensive failure." The briefcase Harrison delivered serves as a reminder that truth takes time to reveal itself, but when it does, it changes everything. Inheritance is not just about money, but about the freedom to define success on your own terms. The best revenge against those who called you a loser is to succeed on your own terms. Every Thanksgiving, the protagonist hosts a dinner at the company headquarters for employees who don't have family nearby or who need a place where they are valued for who they are, not for how much they earn. Last year, 300 people gathered. They raised toasts to second chances, to teachers who became CEOs, and to Grandpa Will, who saw potential where others saw disappointment. The truth was hidden from him for too long, but it, like a good teacher, always finds a way to deliver its lesson.